police training facility, more commonly dubbed as Cop City, has been going through a lot of protests and issues. There's a lot of groups and people who do not want to see this training facility built, and I would describe it as an urban warfare training facility. This was actually spurred on after the George Floyd protest. So just think about it, everybody. The George Floyd protest is worldwide protest. The ruling class go, oh, wow, you see this shit? We are not prepared for this. We need to prepare. Then comes the idea of Cop City. And now to move it along in the story, because there's a lot going on there's a lot in the story, the chronological, and I'm trying to just get to the point of today's discussion. So that's what Cop City is, just on its bare bones. And now there's a lot of protests. There's been a person, a young activist, Manuel, was killed protesting this. That's another big part of the story. There's been protests. There's going to be a referendum, or they're gaining signatures to get a referendum to have this voted on. So now I think I've given you a little bit of tidbits of the backstory. Now with this, let me read this tweet with Ajamu. It says, RICO charges in Atlanta. This is what fascism looks like. Activists charged with felony intimidation for distributing flyers calling a state trooper a murderer for his involvement in the fatal shooting of an environmental protest in the woods. And that's what Ajamu says about this article on AP News, where it says 61 indicted in Georgia on racketeering charges connected to Stop Cop City movement, and a couple of other things here before we get into the discussion to kind of set the groundwork here. And let me go to bring up this tweet from Kamal. This is from Kamal, Black
Franklin
Power Media.
Yeah.
And he's also part of Community Builders, which is the organization in Atlanta. The Cop City RICO indictments allege the date when George Floyd was murdered by the police as the start of the racketeering enterprise.
Yep.
Let that sink in. The day a movement to abolish the police took on new life is the day for them a criminal enterprise was born. What do you think about that, Chuck, to get started with? What do you think about the idea that a movement to stop policing is a criminal enterprise? Like, what do you think of that part of the story before we get into the meat and potatoes?
I think the people who are doing that are fascists. I think we're seeing the highest level of bipartisan fascism locally and nationally. Locally, Governor Brian Kemp and Mayor Dickens are on the same page. A Democratic mayor in a Black Democratic city and a right-wing governor are completely on the same page with Chris Carr, with Georgia State Patrol, with GBI, with Atlanta Police Department, with Atlanta Police Foundation. Just what you're showing right now are many of those people. That's the racketeering operation. Let's be clear. Let's be clear about a couple of other things. The language that you're talking about that is being used, if you go in Atlanta, the law that was originally used to take 42 peaceful protesters and give them domestic terror charges, that was a law created after the Dillon Roof murders. They took a law and perverted that law to go after people fighting racism, fighting police terror. Let me go one step further. After January 6th, there was a DHS bulletin. And in that DHS bulletin, under the guise of fighting white supremacy, they lumped together. They didn't say we're going to go after white terror. They should have specified white terror, given the history in this country. That's not what Biden did. That's not what DHS did. They lumped in a bunch of groups, including environmental activists, and including those who have anger over, quote unquote, use of police force. In other words, what we saw in 2021, some of the new legislation and the new laws and the new funds targeting people after J6, under the guise of J6, was inclusive of the George Floyd uprising in legal language. And we're seeing it used. So when some of us say, hey, you know what? The right wing and the left wing is fascism. I'm more scared of bipartisan fascism than right-wing fascism. And I'm more scared of bipartisan fascism because there's usually no resistance to bipartisan fascism. Whereas at least right-wing fascism, I saw people by the thousands in the street fighting Trump. But I don't see that when a Brian Kemp and an Andre Dickens get together. Outside
and that's what we're seeing here. And let's play a couple of videos here to gain more information. I'll play this one I found. Oh, hang on one second. Let me turn the sound back on.
Oh, this is a great clip you're about to show.
Yeah. So if you wanna set it up, just give a couple of words to set up the video that I'm about to play here. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's gonna turn it on his head. He's gonna call out the real fascists, the real racketeering folks, which are the people I just named, Kemp and Andre Dickens, because they're the terrorists. They're applying terrorist charges and RICO charges on people who've had mud on their shoes or had a cab shirt. And the way they're doing it, they're not finding any evidence that they did any wrongdoing. They're saying they're part of a conspiracy. They're part of a network. So just being a Stop Cop City protester, if I mess up the tractor, if I bomb the tractor, I don't have to be the one caught who bombed the tractor. I could have just been someone working on the referendum or listening to music in a concert. As long as you're with the movement, you could be a mile away. We'll kettle you, we'll get you, and we'll terrorize you and send a message to anyone who wants to fight to stop Cop City. Don't come in because we'll come after you.
And the tweet says the state is throwing RICO charges at those who oppose Cop City. But guess what? The people are throwing a RICO right back. The people's RICO. Cop City is the conspiracy. Capitalism is the conspiracy. And here's that video right now.
Within our system of justice, the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act, or RICO, was developed to bring down large criminal organizations found guilty of violating at least 3 predicate acts of illegality that, when used in concert with one another, established a clear intent to further overall goals of this criminal organization through a pattern of lawlessness, intimidation, and coercion. With that, I'd like to announce this multi-count racketeering indictment against Governor Brian Kemp, Mayor Andre Dickens, the Atlanta Police Foundation, the Atlanta Police Department, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Christopher Carr, and finally, the Georgia State Patrol. This graphic plainly shows these individuals, institutions, and their crimes are connected by the spider web of blue lines. A thin blue line that not only illustrates a web of racketeering, influence, and corruption, but also illustrates the cover-ups, collusions, and protection from accountability for the criminals involved.
Man, that is a pretty cool video. Go ahead with your comments, sir. It looked like you were going to say
that's
something.
Great. That's great. He nailed it. We got to call it for what it is. They're the fascists. They're the terrorists. And they're Democrats and the Republicans and Democrats who under the guise of Atlanta, the great civil rights city. And that's what's so disturbing about it. But I think in the tweet, you see the last line says capitalism is a conspiracy. And I think we have to explain what that means when we say capitalism is a conspiracy. What would make these Democrats in Atlanta with a history of civil rights who invoke MLK on Monday, but want Cop City on Tuesday, what would make them go with Brian Kemp? What would make them dine with Brian Kemp and help these laws and the Atlanta Police Foundation? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's $60 million of the $90 million coming from the Atlanta Police Foundation through corporations. So we're not just talking about climate justice. We're not just talking about racial justice. We're talking about the privatization of policing. And they got 60 million reasons why they would want to build Cop City, despite crime going down 50%, violent crime, despite that you need these resources in all these other places, despite homelessness, despite all of the needs that Atlanta has. But you know what? Home Depot has other needs. You know what? The banks have other needs. Wells Fargo has other needs. Coca-Cola has other needs. And when you have enough billions behind you, it doesn't matter who is the person, because capitalism is the conspiracy and the politician is just putting the will of the corporations over the people.
Spot on. I'll read this tweet here from Hannah Riley. I'm sure you know Hannah. Yeah.
She's great. She's amazing.
Yeah. So it's clear in his press conference about RICO charges against Stop Cop City organizers, Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr explicitly named that Cop City is needed because of the uprising in 2020. This will be replicated in cities across the country. It already is.
That's right.
Because this is not the only Cop City. There's other places. Do you know where one or two of these other sort of Cop City places are being built?
Well, Chicago is one where I just came from. They just talked about last week Baltimore, which is, by the way, the most over-policed, statistically over-policed, and one of the most corrupt police forces you will ever find. And they're talking about it because you could get these foundation dollars. I believe, and I promise you I'm not being hyperbolic, I believe that stopping Cop City is the greatest domestic issue of our time, bar none. Bar none. You talk about stopping fascism. I'm worried about that fascism because it will lead to a domino effect of irreversible dystopian police state across the entire country and will export it beyond our country. And I'm not saying something because I'm smart. I'm late to the game. I got into it when Tortuguita was executed with 57 shots.
Yeah.
But the folks in Atlanta, they educated me. And I want the folks in Atlanta to educate others because they're at the heart of it. They're doing great work. You mentioned Kamau Franklin and community movement builders. You want good press? Check out Scalawag. Check out Michael Hirschkind's piece on a primer of Cop City with 150 links if you want to know what's really going on. Talk about Atlanta Press Collective. I'm giving you names of independent journalists who will give you the real story. It's not going to come from Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who's owned by Cox, who's part of the Atlanta Police Foundation. That's the conspiracy. So you have to go to the independent media to find what's going on. And I've never seen a movement in all my years of covering police terror that is so multi-layered, so respectful, so thoughtful, and attacking it from so many different angles. My hat goes off to everybody in Atlanta and how they are responding to this movement. And they are an activist movement that should be replicated in every other city. And that's why they're trying to stop it. That's why you see RICO charges, because of their success. They're scared.
Yeah, let me play the just for the sake of the segment, make sure we have it in the clip. Let me play the actual press conference that announced the charges right here. It's not long.
As I've said for months, the state of Georgia would not tolerate the repeated acts of violence and destruction that have occurred in an attempt to stop the construction of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, a state-of-the-art facility for firefighters, EMTs, and law enforcement. I vowed as Attorney General to hold accountable those responsible for those actions. Today, I am pleased to announce the latest development in our vigorous pursuit of the suspects. Following an investigation conducted by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Atlanta Police Department, the Georgia Department of Public Safety, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and other law enforcement partners, our office took this case to a Fulton County grand jury on August 29th. Based on the evidence we presented, the grand jury has returned an indictment charging 61 people with violation of the Georgia Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. Some are also charged with domestic terrorism, attempted arson in the first degree, and money laundering. As alleged in the indictment, the defendants are members of Defend the Atlanta Forest, an anarchist, anti-police, and anti-business extremist organization. We contend these 61 defendants together have conspired to prevent the construction
of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center by conducting, coordinating, and organizing acts of violence, intimidation, and property destruction.
Yeah, all right. So we got that on. I do have another clip here because I want to get this information in. I'm getting close to my hard out here. I got to go get my daughter from preschool. But I do want to show this here. because they give a little information.
Just 3 people with the Atlanta Solidarity Fund were each indicted on 15 counts of money laundering for their work to provide bail money and legal aid.
My bad, everybody. Here we go.
We're beginning today's show in Atlanta, Georgia, where the state's Republican Attorney General has announced a sweeping new RICO indictment against 61 activists and others he accuses of being part of a, quote, criminal enterprise to stop Cop City, a massive $90 million police training complex that's facing widespread opposition and ongoing protests. The charges were brought in Fulton County and approved by the same grand jury that indicted former President Donald Trump and 18 of his associates on RICO, or racketeering charges, brought by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who is a Democrat. At a news conference Tuesday, Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr and John Fowler, head of Georgia's prosecution division, laid out their allegations and why they brought the case in Fulton County.
Now, this report on Democracy Now! That I just played, it goes on to talk about how it feels like this is a reaction to the RICO charges of Trump. Amy Goodman, in that report says that, and when she goes on, I can't play it because for the sake of time, but she goes on to say how, yeah, this feels like this is a reaction to that, which to me makes a little sense. Because think about it, oh, you guys gonna indict him on this bull, trumped up. Okay, when we're gonna use that shit over here, because remember, this was sent to the grand jury on August 29th. That's after Trump's indictment came down. Chuck, let me play this video from Angela Davis, and then I'll allow you to comment, sir.
Okay, one of the most important movements today is the movement to stop Cop City. We saw the influence of the police decline as a consequence of the uprisings that began in 2020, and Cop City represents the effort of police all over the country to reclaim their position. That is why it is important for activists everywhere to join the movement to stop Cop City.
Thank you.
And that's a great point made by Angela Davis, Chuck. If you want to comment on that and anything else I said, but I want to ask this question.
Yeah.
Where are all the black leaders? Where's Al Sharpton? Where's Stacey Abrams? Where's Senator Warnock? Where are these people? What? This is easy. All the black Atlanta celebrities. Where's Usher? Where's Jermaine Dupri? Like, where are they?
I don't think you see them. Let me just tell you. Let me thank Dr. Angela Davis, because she was leaving. I was in the hotel in Chicago this weekend, and she was about to get in her car and leave. And I said, and I just happened to run into her, and I said, Dr. Davis, can you just give me a couple comments on Cop City? And she shared that, and I'm really happy, and I'm going to tell you why. Because she is a radical, but it's someone who has cachet in more mainstream places. So I'm hoping if you see when Angela Davis comes out and talks about it, and Bernice King to a degree has said some things, that there could be an effect. But once it gets into electoral politics, you're not seeing that. Warnock's head and Ossoff milquetoast, really weak comments. And what's so crazy about the whole thing, particularly about the 2 Atlanta senators, is that they've spent their entire time talking about voter suppression from the GOP, which is absolutely correct, by the way. Their analysis on the GOP is correct when they talk about the shenanigans that they do. However, when the Atlanta Police Department and the mayor of Atlanta are doing the same voter suppression tactics and trying to deny a referendum to get the people to vote, you got nothing to say. You're quiet. That voter suppression is okay. And even the strongest comments from politician, which was Jamal Bowman, he caveated his second sentence with right-wing attempts. Is Mayor Dickens right-wing? Is the Atlanta leadership right-wing? So he probably said the strongest line. I don't have it before me. But then the second line, he caveated it with BS because
He
Kevin's
erased it.
for it. But
So
Mayor Dickens and the Atlanta City Council, they're all Democrats. Julian Bond's son voted with the corporations and against the people.
God.
So what
This
we're
is
talking
just
about,
disheartening.
if you want to know why, your question, you're not seeing the celebrities because $60 million is more powerful than justice, than the people.
That is a damn. Oh, and I forgot Ludacris is another, known for always talking about Atlanta. Here's another clip you sent me, less than a minute. I got a couple of minutes left in the stream, then I got to get out of here. So let's make sure we get this one in. Let's listen what she talks about this being a litmus test.
I think this is a really, really, really important moment, right? Because Atlanta sort of serves as a litmus test, right, to determine what is and is not doable or what is and is not okay, because we have such a distinct and profound Black misleadership class, right? This Black elite class. And so in many ways, folks are sort of seeing that if Atlanta allows for something like a cop city to happen, then it can happen everywhere else, right? So now we're seeing that Baltimore is proposing a cop city that's being not only funded by, but also on the campus of an HBCU in the city, right? We see that happening with Chicago. We see it happening with Portland. We see that happening with a bunch of different cities around the country. And we will see it happening beyond the country itself, right? And so in many ways, we are witnessing Atlanta function as the city that helps to determine what comes next and what will be allowed in other cities. I think this is a really, really, really important moment.
Maybe the establishment that's trying to build this understands that dynamic too.